Apple here. The camera view is a little bit different from where my eyes are, so the highlights are going to be in slightly different places, but I'm going to point to them anyway. So we have in my apple, we've got some highlights. One thing I noticed from where I'm sitting is we've got really bright white lights that are happening right along the top kind of rounded rim of the apple. It's going to be kind of tricky for me to mix the colors of the apple, to put them on in layers, and to still kind of move around them with my brush. So one really good use of masking fluid is for places like that. So what I have done is with the masking fluid, I've used this really old but small brush. You don't want to use a really nice brush. One of your nice brushes will immediately get ruined by masking fluid. So don't use masking fluid with really nice brushes. But if you've got like a really, like an old junky brush, you can even use something like a toothpick to dip it into the masking fluid. And if you've got something like, just a really tiny shape or something, you can certainly use something like that. So what I've done there is painted the masking fluid on the parts of my apple that I have noticed are picking up those really super bright white highlights, right? So you can see it is kind of yellowish, right? So that's where the masking fluid has dried. And then I've also put just a tiny kind of little strip of masking fluid on the stem of my apple. Can't really see it, I think, from the camera, but one thing I noticed about the stem of the apple is it's got a little bit of a rim of light. So I kind of want to keep that too. That's going to be hard to paint around. So those are the places where I've got the masking fluid. I've let it dry completely, right? So it takes several minutes. But what I'm going to hope to do, move my palette around a little bit. What I'm going to have to do is once I've got my masking fluid completely dry, I'm going to mix up the kind of yellower is not really a word, is it? Some of the more yellow places of the apple, kind of right along that section. There's also some yellows kind of on the inside of it, but then it starts to shift a little more in the kind of yellow-green direction, right in here. So I've got my kind of warm yellows as well as my kind of yellow greens. And this is really kind of the only place where I notice those warm yellows, because everywhere else on my apple it gets pretty dark. Maybe there's a little bit what I'm noticing kind of underneath the apple from my perspective starts to turn a little bit yellow. But just for the sake of kind of the speed of my demo here, I'm going to go ahead and mix my red. So I've got some cadmium red, but this is an apple that gets really pretty deep red. So while it's still wet, I'm going to use my cadmium red in those places right up against the more yellowy places. You notice I'm painting right on top of where I painted the masking fluid because I don't have to worry about anything, right? Because I've got those all covered. And because I felt like these sections over here of the apple had some kind of yellowish tint, I'm going to let that bleed right into the red colors around it. But still working wet into wet, right? Wet into wet is letting one wet wash of color bleed directly into another one. I'm going to pick up some of my crimson red. Ooh, it's really hard and dry. Might have to squirt some more out here. And because I had that area masked off with the masking fluid, again, I can work very quickly and kind of put my first layer of this really, really saturated kind of red color all over the apple without having to worry about painting around those highlights, right? You see it kind of resisting the paint, right, that I put on there. And that's pretty convenient because I definitely wouldn't have been able to work that quickly. And I think one thing I noticed is right here along the edge, I've got the masking fluid painted there, but I'm gonna pick up a little bit of that red paint just because I noticed the highlight kind of softens and fades out a little bit along the edge of that, right? So I'm kind of starting with the masking fluid section and then kind of lifting a little bit of that color. And I might do some of that here along the back edge as well, right? It starts to kind of blend with the cool light coming in from the window. So the masking fluid, right, shows up, right? It's still got the white of the paper, but you know, everything else that I've painted around it, make sure I haven't missed any spots with my red. Everything else obviously has the color that's kind of sinking down into the paper, but is protected with the masking fluid, right? So that can be pretty convenient and can make it easier to paint right over, right? Those highlights, right? I don't have to worry about keeping the white of the paper in place because I've already protected it, right, with the masking fluid. So that is masking fluid and how to